It is Thursday, time for Worldview with Denis Campbell. Denis is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine, also author of this book, Billionaire Boys Election Freak Show, What Happened in the 2012 U.S. Election. Denis, let's go to the latest on the Leveson press inquiry involving News Corporation and eventually to questions of how will this affect, if at all, Fox News in the U.S. But let's start with a backgrounder of what's been going on.
Sure. The Leveson press inquiry started a little over a year ago, and it came as a result of the death of a young 12-year-old girl by the name of Millie Dowler. What happened was that in the course of the investigation to try and find her, family members noticed that they went into her voicemail and messages had been deleted, and that gave them a sense of false hope that indeed she was still alive. As we later learned, it was actually one of the very notorious British tabloids and one of their reporters that had gone in and deleted several of the messages in the hope because they were trying to get a scoop on the story. That led to the Leveson press inquiry. That was several other instances of phone hacking and just generally reprehensible behavior by the British tabloids, many of whom were owned by Rupert Murdoch, to this inquiry that went on, and it became must-see TV all fall, spring, and summer. Literally, you had morning and afternoon sessions where prime ministers, editors of major publications, people who were pretty much the heads of media around the United Kingdom were called before Lord Justice Leveson to give testimony. That testimony led to the earlier recommendation that Fox was not fit. Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch were not fit to run a company such as News International, and it began to spiral from there. Since then, there have been arrests for phone hacking, for attempting to influence the government via payoffs and threats and blackmail. So it's been something we've been watching with great interest for quite some time.
So what was the latest now in the recent report, and what do we know as far as the future operations of News Corporation in the UK?
Well, the report came out last week, and they basically are still very damning towards James and Rupert Murdoch. That's part one. What's happened, though, today is that a number of the editors of tabloids as well as broadsheet newspapers have come forward to say, yes, we do need to have some sort of regulatory body. But they don't want to have Ofcom, which is the official media watchdog for not just newspapers, but for all broadcast media. And it's an anti-competition governmental board that looks at how people behave, their business practices, etc. What this could mean for Fox in the United States, and as well as Rupert Murdoch in general, is that there are a number of individuals that are on trial or will soon be on trial for criminal inquiries. Today we had Rebecca Colson, who was the head of News International, as well as Andy Coulson, who was the person who was a friend of the Prime Minister and was on his press staff, who was then hired by News International. Both of them appeared at the Old Bailey today on charges of trying to improperly influence government. What that means for Fox in the U.S. is that if either of them is convicted for that or for any of the phone hacking trials, you could see actions under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act brought in the United States. That's a whole new ballgame. That involves the Federal Communications Committee as well as the SEC. Right now, the SEC doesn't have a head, but it could become very interesting. And why this is not a news headline in the States right now, as Murdoch is attempting to purchase two very large news organizations in the States, is beyond me.
So let's talk a little bit about this idea of government control of media, right? I mean, here in the U.S., there's a number of different situations that we have. On the one hand, we had what came out during the debates, the presidential debates, where Mitt Romney talked about this subsidy to PBS, and there is some subsidization on the record of media, certain media outlets, by the government. At the same time, you have a lot of issues, as we see with Fox News and many other of these corporate mainstream media outlets, where while they are not necessarily subsidized, there is this kind of intrinsic, kind of incestuous nature to where the news is produced, and the fact that so many of these corporate media outlets, in order not to lose access to people that they want to be talking to, are essentially buddy-buddy with government organizations and the like, which is a totally different issue altogether. What third or what monkey wrench is being thrown into this now by the involvement that we're seeing now with the Leveson press inquiry and News Corporation in the UK?
Well, you have the standard issue, of course, where people in the United States would say this would be a violation of First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. No such freedom of speech right exists here, although it is somewhat implied. What I find very interesting is that in this country, if one were to practice some of the hate speech and the fear-mongering and the outright lying that you've seen to the level that you saw during the recent presidential campaign, some of those people would be facing the inside of a jail cell, and rightfully so. Some of the Muslim beatings, some of the the things that you've seen, and some of the things that, frankly, the president has been accused of not even being an American, not even being capable of holding the office because he was born in Kenya or whatever. All these sorts of things would not even be attempted here because our libel laws, as well as our laws against hate speech, are very, very strong. So that said, I find that to be a benefit. What scares me is that if the government tries to put a broad blanket across all offenders, and tries to say that everyone who, for example, like myself, has a news organization that's largely based on the fact that it's a blog, I'm outside the traditional Fleet Street media, would be under some sort of new form of regulation, that would be a real constriction on my ability to do what I do. So obviously there are some very big concerns, and we don't want to be painted with the same brush that the tabloids here are painted with.
Absolutely. So it seems in the same way that the internet in the U.S. and around the world is really causing a lot of laws to have to be created, changed, or modified based on how people actually use the medium, the variety of media outlets because of the internet is also kind of causing the same thing, where by putting everybody in the same category, you're going to create a lot of new problems in trying to solve some others.
Exactly. And you start to ask the question, what is a news organization? What is a news gathering organization? I mean, we place, with our magazine, UK Progressive, a very high stamp of credibility, because we want to make certain that we get the story right. Others in the blogosphere, as it's called, are not as diligent, and I think that's the potential to then add to the definition of, well, what is a blogger, what is a journalist, what is a mainstream media outlet, and then to what level would whatever comes out of any sort of regulatory body affect what they do, their ability to get things such as insurance, things of that sort. It becomes a real business issue.
All right, we're going to keep following you. We've been speaking with Denis Campbell, editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine.
And I'm proudly wearing my David Pakman hoodie today. So.
Wearing a David Pakman Show hoodie in charcoal. That's exactly right. The
charcoal.
I guess some people call it black. We call it charcoal because
I love it. Become a member. It's warm. It's very, very comfy, and I'm very grateful. And I'm going to be going out into the freezing cold, so I'm looking forward to it.
Hard to believe it's made from recycled plastic bottles, but that's a story for another day. The book is Billionaire Boys Election Freak Show. Check it out, and we'll talk to Denis again next week. Thanks as always, Denis.
Thank you. See you next week.